It's no secret that women in this country have been bearing the brunt of this pandemic. Millions are on the front lines at home, weathering the storm of closed schools, lost jobs, and growing hunger inside their families. The crisis is now adding fresh urgency to a near century-old movement to shore up protections for women in the U.S. Constitution. So after a long fight, will the Equal Rights Amendment ever become part of the law of the land? Here's ABC's Devin Dwyer.
Nearly 50 years after Congress passed the Equal Rights Amendment, there's still no mention of women in the U.S. Constitution.
Do you think this marching is going to impress the men inside this building?
Yes, I do, and I hope so, because now is the time.
For decades, the ERA has been stuck in a political purgatory, just 3 states short of the 38 ratifications needed to make it official. Deadlines have come and gone. Women have kept marching. The language of the amendment is straightforward but far-reaching, stating that equality of rights under the law shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or by any state on account of sex. Advocates say those words are primed to finally become law at a critical time.
Here we are 50 years later fighting the same battle all over again. I want to stop that.
Professor Deepa Kumar says despite years of progress, gender discrimination is still very real.
I was started off with a very good salary. And the problem, though, is that that salary level did not keep up.
She was hired in 2004 as a professor at Rutgers University, the same school where in 1969, a young law professor, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, won a settlement over unequal pay for female faculty. Kumar and 4 other women professors sued the school again last year.
I mean, I felt like I'm being treated like a second-class citizen. It was hurtful. It was humiliating. If I could be treated this way, what about people who don't have job security?
Rutgers would not comment on Kumar's case, but tells ABC News it's creating a new pay equity program and is committed to resolving outstanding pay equity requests as quickly and responsibly as possible. On average, women in the U.S. earn just 82 cents for every dollar earned by men. The gap even wider for women of color. Experts say the pandemic is threatening to make that pay inequality even worse.
You look at what's happening with women across the workforce in this country right now because of COVID. Women's, inequality has exacerbated. You look at the job loss for women. I mean, it is a palpable feeling.
More than 2.3 million women have left the workforce since the pandemic began, including another 275,000 just last month. January marked the lowest labor force participation rate for women in more than 30 years.
I was actually in the middle of feeding my daughter when this bill came up.
California Assemblywoman Buffy Wicks became a symbol of the crisis last fall when she was forced to take her infant daughter to the State House floor in order to do her job.
What you're going to see happening, I fear, is women coming out of the workforce because of the pandemic, and their male counterparts are moving up in the ladder at work, and they're moving down, and then they're going to have to re-enter the workforce, and they're going to be this far behind. So that pay inequity will increase again over time.
What do you think the fix is?
If we enshrine the ERA into the Constitution, that guarantees equity and equality for women across this country.
Advocates argue the amendment would give a constitutional basis for women to fight back against pay inequality.
It's very important, to actually have law that allows women to challenge the injustice and the discrimination that they're facing so that, it's equal pay for equal work for all.
And it's not just the wage gap.
The fact that in 30 of the 50 states, menstrual products are not exempt from sales tax because they're not deemed necessities.
The so-called tampon tax has been banned by nearly a dozen other countries, but its persistence in the U.S. is still surprising to many.
I have to tell you, I have no idea why states would tax these as luxury items. I suspect it's because men were making the laws when those taxes were passed.
So you're saying if you doubt gender inequality exists, look no further than the tampon tax.
And most people, when they hear that, it forces almost anyone to go, I never thought about that. Why is that? Who decided that?
Congress voted in 1972 with overwhelming bipartisan majorities to approve the ERA. 35 states quickly voted to ratify the amendment, but it wasn't until last year that Virginia became the final state required of a 3/4 majority to make it official. There was just one problem.
Congress, in its infinite wisdom, decided to put a deadline on passing it. Very paternalistic.
That deadline was in 1982, the ERA failing to hit the mark after conservative activist Phyllis Schlafly led a movement of women in opposition.
I think some women like to blame sexism for their failures instead of admitting they didn't try hard enough.
Her crusade immortalized in the FX series Mrs. America, Schlafly warning the ERA would upend American society, leading to women drafted into the military, an end to restrictions on abortion, and the elimination of gender designations for bathrooms.
What I am against is a small, elitist group of Northeastern establishment liberals putting down homemakers.
We have intractable problems that can only be solved by fixing the Constitution and really declaring that you cannot discriminate based on sex. And that's all that this amendment says, and we've been working on it for 100 years.
With Democrats in control in Washington and a record number of women in Congress, the movement sees a new opening. Congresswoman Jackie Speer of California and more than 200 lawmakers from both parties have sponsored a bill to remove the deadline for ERA ratification and allow it to become law.
We do have momentum in a way that we haven't had probably for decades. There is no deadline on equality, and it's about time we recognize it.
The Biden administration says enacting the ERA is a centerpiece of its agenda for women, but major legal hurdles still remain. A U.S. Justice Department analysis last year concluded that Congress may not revive a proposed amendment after the deadline has expired. Even Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg conceded before her death that the process would need to start over.
The ERA fell 3 states short of ratification. I hope someday it will be put back in the political hopper, starting over again.
Many ERA advocates argue that legal analysis is flawed.
There are many constitutional scholars that argue that it's unconstitutional to put a deadline in a constitutional amendment.
If this becomes the newest amendment, what happens?
There has been discrimination. It's around pay, it's around pregnancy, and it's around violence against women. So those are the areas that will be impacted.
Is it your sense that some of the legal challenges that women have been bringing will continue to bring? Would those cases be easier, in effect, if this was in the Constitution?
Absolutely. No question about it.
A push to root out discrimination backed by the power of the Constitution.
Do you think this is the moment it's going to happen?
I think this is the moment it's going to happen.
As millions of American women say the time has come to get it done. For ABC News Live, I'm Devin Dwyer in Washington.
No deadline on equality. Our thanks to Devin for that.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.